Hello everyone, I'm doing one more of these, at least, for round 3 of GP Dambulla. I had a lot of fun doing it the first time for round 2, so I said I'll keep it going, and by that I mean we're doing match previews. So there are 7 matches here, we're going to try and get through them fairly quickly. We do not have Ricky this time around, sadly. I wish we did, but it's just me, we don't have the luxury of a game right before this, so we'll get into it. Round 1, not Match 1, sorry, we have Crush, who is on Blue, Black, Red Exile, versus Ban Crabs, who's on Gerald Jund, the version that Ricky took into decklist just before the GP. I favor Gerald Jund here. So far, Crush hasn't really put up a fight. I mean, they were able to take a game versus Cyber, and that deck is otherwise undefeated, I believe. So this is pretty notable. But I've never been particularly high on the Exile deck. Ban Crabs, if you go by the kind of metric, Ban Crabs 0-2 versus Cyber, Crush 1-2 versus Cyber, you can look at that and say maybe Crush has a better chance, but like I said, I'm not super high on the Exile deck. Ban Crabs, the worst positioned 1-1 right now, got the bye in round 2, and the bye always hurts your metrics. But I do like this deck. I mean, Ricky so far has done pretty well with it. So I think it will be able to hopefully succeed here. Eyes That Bite should do a good job against the Exile deck because depending on hand, it's going to be really easy to get the highest or lowest card, and that 2-1 just kind of eats anything that Crush plays. So I favor Ban Crabs in this matchup. For match 2, we go to a Little Blank, who's on the classic Aggro Legends deck, versus Toasty, who's on Jeskai Eureka. Jeskai Eureka is a deck I favored a lot going into this, but this version of it, currently 1-1, fighting for its life down here. I do like this version, but the question is the 4-Bottle Lightning, is the Dawn Wisp Fence going to be enough to stop the assault from Legends? This Legends deck is pretty strong. I think this is the strongest version we've seen. So this version throws in Master Zoo, and it also gets access to Iason, who is a creature that pumps legendary permanents while also itself being a legendary permanent. So as good as Emperor's Retainer is in the deck, this is a version that itself gets pumped by Emperor's Retainer and gets to benefit from the other odd bits of legendary support like the Lost in Seeking or Jack. So I think that a Little Blank with Iason has a big bonus here. It's a small change, but it's a little bit of extra consistency that helps a lot. Legends does feel like it has a lot of variance hand to hand, and this adds another really good piece. But of course, Dawn Wisp Fence is a really good card. I would honestly say this is a pretty even matchup. I honestly can't say I know which way it's going to go. For match 3, Splash Cat, who is also on Jeskai, Study, Eureka, however you want to call it, versus, in their case, 6 Requiem, who's on Desert Heart, so the Desert deck. I guess I should talk about how they got here for the previous matches too. So a Little Blank lost to Splash Cat in round 1, but after that loss was able to beat Hertzy and actually drop them out of the 0-2 to them out of the GP in round 2. Hertzy put up a great fight. No shame over there, right? Great deck to watch. We had great time commentating it. For Toasty got beat by Requiem in round 1. So crazily enough, like all these 1-1s kind of faced each other. But after that loss, Toasty beat Nyx, who we talked about in round 2, who was on Polymorph, who ended up dropping, even though Polymorph went from winning the GP to 0-2, pretty much the highest of highs, the lowest of lows. But back to Splash and Requiem. So that Desert Heart deck, of course, won in round 1. And then lost to Dat Rubino in round 2. We'll talk about their deck later. And Splash, after winning round 1, fell to Epid, who we will also talk about later. So this matchup, it's going to be tricky. I wasn't super high on this Desert deck, but it was able to take a game, and it isn't against a slouch. Toasty's Eureka deck is obviously good. And I think the simple math is this deck already beat the Eureka deck once. And I don't think there's a meaningful quality of gameplay differential. I don't think there is one that could exist between two people in this GP that would make that not happen again. Admittedly, I didn't watch that original game. Maybe in game 1 Toasty got horrific variance luck, but the numbers check out on it. I mean, it is odd. Like, this deck has a lot of targeted removal, but I think the freedom of just being able to make the birds, I think there's an ability to swarm the board. You keep up the cards in a way that Eureka needs a little bit more time to set up, and it struggles to attack you in meaningful ways before then. So I think I favor Requiem here. The historical evidence likes it as well. For the last of the 1-1 matchups, so the winner of those two games moves on. The loser of those two games falls out of the ability to get top cut. And it's also true of this. Taya Belly, who's on the Spiritual Guidance Azorius control deck, versus Ricky, who's also on Gerald Jund. Of course, this version a little bit different. Ricky opted for A Journey Begins over Elysian Bounty and has a slightly different spread. Isn't on stand unassailable at all. So obviously a different deck. Ricky, so far this tournament, beat Crush in round 1, but wasn't able to overcome Zangi in round 2. You'll never guess we'll talk about Zangi's deck later. And Taya Belly, I think the first person who lost in round 1 of these 1-on-1s that we've seen, fell to Epid, but down 0-1, was able to beat Evster 1 and got into the 1-1 spot. So Taya Belly on this more control-y deck, Ricky on this mid-range deck. I'm trying to think about the way that it goes, because I'm trying to remember the way that the rock, paper, scissors matchup goes around, because I'd say this is a very clean mid-range versus control matchup, and I don't remember which one beats which. I'm pretty sure control beats mid-range, because you just kind of, like, control beats mid-range but loses to aggro, and mid-range beats aggro but loses to control. I believe that's the rock, paper, scissors. And it makes sense. Stuff like Event Horizon, the sinkholes, all the counter spells are going to be pretty good against Ricky. Ricky's going to have a lot of mana, but, you know, there's Gerald. If you can control the board, stuff like Gerald. The biggest threat is going to be Eyes That Bite, really. Eyes That Bite is just so good. I'm pretty high on this card. I've seen it, I think, once or twice now, and it's always been good. Don't remember when exactly. Admittedly, most of it is other people telling me it's really good, but definitely an enjoyable card. I think Taya Belly might be able to take this one. I'm going to favor the control deck here. I think their curve matches up nicely against Ricky's on the play and on the draw. But another matchup that's very critical. We're moving on now. We're out of the 1-on-1s. We're not done with all the 1-on-1s. Your Average Idiot, who's on Jund Scam, is a 1-on-1 who got the bye in round 1, fell to Skagra in round 2, which means we've heard from all the players now, but we haven't covered all the decks. And so Jund Scam is going to be facing off against Epid, who's the first 2-0, who end up getting pared down. Epid went 2-1 versus Taya Belly in round 1 and went 2-1 versus Splash in round 2. So with the worst game-winning percentage, they got matched down and is on the red-green Stompy deck. So a pretty solid deck here. This version pares down a little bit, loses a Veed-free Rider. Reed-free Rough Rider is the card. But we've already seen this deck before. We know it does good stuff. Jund Scam is up against it, which we've seen Scam decks before, but this version that uses Gerald, I think, is one of the stronger versions we've seen. Obviously, you have the Karmic Exorcism, Eyes That Bite, that nice pair. I think this deck, it's going to be close. I do think this matches up well, though, against that Stompy deck. You're on the Amorphous Tyrants. You're on the Blood Fiend Ravagers and the Vile Progenitors. Specifically, Blood Fiend Ravager and Amorphous Tyrant. Both are going to do a really good job of defeating Epid's threats. Boundless Strider, Ulvenwald Ranger, Unflipped. Pretty much everything in their deck, but the top end of Rova and Behemoth and Asalia, which does kind of hurt. All of that dies to that 2 damage mark. And along with that, because you have such big creatures, Ferocious Flames, Solar Flare, the Flames Approach, that feels a lot worse. Now, there is always going to be games where, you know, if you're able to time stuff up right, like if you go, oh, I'm going to cast Bog Rebirth, okay, I'm going to burn out your creature. Blood Fiend Ravager dies to that stuff, but like Amorphous Tyrant doesn't. So I think that's the only real way, Amorphous Tyrant with the right board setup, like if you have an Elvish Wayfinder or something. But Elvish Wayfinder is going to struggle. I think this is a pretty close matchup. It's going to be a lot dependent on how they play in like this early, how you enter the mid game. I think for both of these decks is important. You need to be able to carry the momentum into the mid game without ceding too much to your opponent in an attempt to find the perfect spot. And into the 2-0s now, so the big games here, the winners of these are going to be pretty critical. We got Cyber, who is on Juyu Jeskai with Operative Posh. This card just got nerfed, but clearly not. I don't want to say not enough because cards are allowed to win, but it clearly didn't knock it out of contention because as a 4-of, as the only creature in this deck, it's still doing really great. Versus Skagra's on Moonlit Hunter, which, if you listen to my commentary earlier, you know about this deck. This deck's really good, just super strong. It has so much like survivability, like the natural ability to Xerox early game and then set it up into Moonlit Hunter. And this deck is just so resilient. It can take a lot of knocks and still get right back up and start comboing. Like, you would think it's more requirements of like, oh yeah, you need a Moonlit Hunter and you need a Kelp Garden, or you need your dual land and you need enough cantrips to get it going, but that's all your deck is those pieces. So it's easier than you think to get it going. For Cyber though, this deck's pretty controlling. Fullman does look bad into this matchup here, I'm not gonna lie, and I'm very high on Fullman, but he doesn't look great here. And similarly, like Hemley Egg Feather doesn't really do that much here. The -2 will help though. So honestly, I think between Posh and Hemley, you have a very good chance. Out of Body Experience, of course, helps. Cosmic Sinkhole. I think Cyber is probably best positioned here. You have so much time to get the pieces that you need to answer Skagra's stuff. And Skagra doesn't have a lot of answers to that. I mean, you have Tranquil Moment, you have the Publicly Disgraced in the board, but other than that, you don't have like counter magic or anything. Skagra's deck isn't designed to play the game on the stack. It is, I'm going to slowly accumulate my advantage, and because of the cantrips, and you don't just have cantrips too, you have Alone with My Thoughts, you have stuff like Seek Prophecy that gives you a lot of selection. Stuff like All the Time in the World gives you a lot of looks. Something like Culminating Conspiracy gets you a lot of looks. You're drawing off your Chi Hastens. You're milling off your Kelp Gardens for your Rush of Stillness. There's a lot of this interconnected ability. This is going to be a close game. I think if any deck is going to have a good chance against Skagra, it might be Cyber. We've seen how strong this deck is. We'll see. It's going to be an exciting game, and I think the biggest game, the number one watch, these are the players they both 2-0'd up until here. It's Zangy, who's on Burn, versus Dat Rubino, who's on Bogles. Now, Bogles comes in as the sleeper hit. We haven't had one of these in a while. I'm very excited to see it. It's great to see, like, obviously, I mean, I don't think there's any better way to join as a new player than running a deck and getting to go 2-0, 2-0, and getting into round 3 as one of the favorites to win it all. The question here, and this is the question I had when in round 2 I said, okay, Dat Rubino's probably going to beat Requiem because that deck just matches up horribly into Bogles. How is Dat Rubino going to lose? And the answer is there's one deck that might be able to beat Dat Rubino, and it's Zangy, who's on Burn, because Burn can just go under Bogles. And Dat Rubino doesn't have a lot of options for lifelink. There is Coralite Mystic, which obviously comes in, and there's already one of those main, and I think there's one that gives lifelink maybe two in the auras. Golden Touch gives lifelink as well. So Dat Rubino's not completely disadvantaged, but it's going to be a question of post-board. You have essentially 6 ways to give yourself lifelink. Can you find one of those in time? I think if you find one of those, Zangy just doesn't have the gas to deal with a big creature causing that much life gain. But if not, it's going to be a really close game, and I think Zangy probably wins that game more often than not without some lifelink on that side. So it's going to be a close game. It's going to come down to the wire, probably, in game 1. And then games 2 and 3, if it gets that game 3, it's going to be about the sideboard options. Obviously, Zangy has answers for that too. You're bringing in the Scorching Condemnation, for sure. You're going to bring in the Hexstone. You have other options on Zangy's side, and for Dat Rubino, you're going to say, well, I probably need to run Tidal Spite. Like, Tidal Spite doesn't really matter, actually. I forgot that it only bounces creatures. But, I mean, like, Tidal Spite, really? I mean, Bramble Armor isn't a terrible idea. Against Hexstone, maybe? I'm not a Bogles player, so I don't know. Maybe it is a bad idea. But, I mean, Tidal Spite isn't a terrible card either. I mean, making your opponents put their creatures back in hand will slow down Burn a little bit. You're on the Coralite Mystic. It's going to be a close one. It's going to be a close one. You're going to want to tune in, and fingers crossed I'll be able to commentate it. But with that, thank you for watching the round 3 matchup review with Asti. And again, make sure to stay tuned. And also check out the Skagra versus Hertzy video, finally up. because my internet decided to cut out for a bunch of time. Apparently the fiber line just caught on fire. I didn't know they could do that, but it did. So the fiber line caught on fire, so I didn't have internet for like a day. So sorry guys. I wanted to upload it sooner, I promise. But again, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.